Well, we want to say Thursday greetings to each and every person that is joining us today. It's an amazing day. It's April 17th, 2025, and I want to welcome you to House Calls with your man, Dr. Rory T. And today we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people are whispering in their private circles or in their group of influence or amongst themselves on social media because that's where people seem to go to voice their concerns or they want to know about answers. They want answers to certain things. And so what I did is I had to reflect on a time that I thought that I was challenging people through a historical perspective, and that's what I want to talk today about. In this particular segment of House Calls with Dr. Rory T. Edwards, is from a historical perspective on what we are actually witnessing in this current day and time. And so, one of the things I want to talk about is that, we are living in a time when the empire is crumbling, not just politically, but spiritually, morality, economically, and culturally. The system that we once trusted is now showing cracks. The institutions we thought would save us are slowly dissolving. But the storm, this storm that we're actually going through, it's not a curse. It's a revelation. It's in the history books. It's in history. Why do I say that? Because one of my greatest moments in life was when I was a teacher. I had an opportunity to teach at a very well known private school. And I want to say that I believe that I gained a lot of experience there because one of the things that I gained was the understanding that teachers are put in schools to not to believe that they're the smartest person because they're standing in the front of the room, but to also pull out the best of the students that they teach. And for me, it was a very different environment because in the history of that school at that time, I was the only person ever of color to teach at that school. And until the school ended, I was the only teacher of color that ever taught at that school. And the great thing about it is that when I tell people about that, they said, "How was that experience?" Well, it was just like any experience when you go into a situation. You want to believe yourself, you want to make people believe that you're the only person ever to do this because you want to make people and make people believe that you are the greatest. And that's what was bestowed upon me. The 2 years I was there, I received Teacher of the Year for both years. So it had nothing to do with how I looked, but it had to do with what I pulled out of these students. And I say all that just to say that the classes that I taught was ancient history and medieval history. And one of the things that I did in my first year, because I was a little new to the medieval history, is I asked the students to help, let's design the syllabus for future classes. And so they gave me an opportunity to work with them, and they worked with me, and we developed a syllabus going forward. But one of the things that was really funny is that when I thought about this topic today, I went back and I tried to pull up some of the notes on some of the questions that the students had asked me in reference to ancient history. And when we're talking about right now that the system, the empire for which we are living in right now is crumbling, I want to talk to you about the law of gravity in this because we know that everything that goes up must come down. Everything that chooses to be great will eventually fall. And so we talked about some of the great empires. And so when I went back and pulled up some notes, I wanted to look at, well, what were some of the most uh, greatest empires ever? And what happened to them? Right? So let's talk about some of these great empires. I'm not going to go into historical perspective about it. I'm just going to mention them. But I'm going to mention why they all eventually failed and fell. But when they talk about empires, this is what I want you to realize. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm saying today. When they talk about empires, they say some of the greatest empires were the Roman Empire. They say the Ottoman Empire. They say the British Empire, which lasted probably the longest in the history of the world. And then they talk about the Byzantine Empire. And then they talk about the Abbasid Empire. And they talk about the Persian Empire. And then they talk about the Mongol Empire. And then they talk about the Carolingian Empire. Now, you never heard me mention any empires in Africa. It's not mentioned anywhere, and we think that this is new information. They're trying to erase us out of history because they want us to understand or want us to believe that we had no significance in the development of this world. But I'm not going there today, but I just want to mention they don't talk about the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Ethiopian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Mesopotamian Empire. All of these empires were first, right? They were first. But what happens is that they do not mention any of these empires as successful empires. What they're trying to do today now is they say that the pyramids could not have been created by the Egyptians. They didn't have the wherewithal, the knowledge, anything like that to develop those great pyramids or the Sphinx or anything of that nature. What they're saying is that there was help from the Anakian who came down from outer space and were huge individuals who helped these individuals put together the pyramids, and that's the only way that the Egyptians could do it. But I don't hear them saying that the Anunnaki helped put together the colossal colosseums in Greece, or the huge empires and castles that the Romans lived in during their empire. I don't hear them flying over to the British Empire, which lasted so long, for them to build those particular empires. So why is it that when people are talking about empires being built by extraterrestrial individuals, it only has to be the Egyptian empires and the Malis and the Ghanas and the Ethiopians that were helped by these individuals? And now they're saying they found this highly technical communication system with the universe that's infused within the pyramids. You see what heights and great height people are going to try to destroy what is really the historical component of the building of this country, of this world. Nobody talks about, they don't talk about the Moors who ruled over in Spain for 700 years and was the main group that gave the Europeans the knowledge and the ability to create systems that they operate under currently, right? Because when the Moors got there, the kings and queens were living in the stables with their horses and cows. But the Moors transformed that. The Moors gave them electricity. The Moors gave them the ability to separate their livestock from the human stock. They helped them with the diseases that they had acquired. But nobody's talking about this. But that's not my rant today. And I don't want to call it a rant. I want to talk about what are we going to talk about? What it means to be unscathed, not untouched, but unbroken, because we are living in a time when the empire is crumbling. When you look up empires today, what would be the closest thing to an empire? You know what Google tells you? The United States and China. So, when we look at what's going on today, let me talk to you about how you evolve and how leaders are developed in the crumbling of empires. And let me tell you what happens when empires crumble, and what are the internal causes and external causes. And then you make your own decisions about, are you living in the times of an empire crumbling, right? So, when they talk about the fall of empires happens in cycles. What's new is how we respond to the falling, how we identify the crumbling of these empires. They said the storms usually are prophesized. The storms are in the books of knowledge, the books of what your foundation may be. They say the storms are prophesized, so you got to understand what that means. So I want you to know that when we look at chaos, like we may be living in chaos right now. But chaos is not the enemy, complacency is. So if you allow yourself to sit within the storm and to be sucked into it, then you will also suffer at the hands of the storm. Now, what are some of the other things? It's the system versus self. It's also legacy builders rise in the ruins. So let me tell you what happens and how empires fail. And you just let me know if you believe that what we're in right now is an empire failing, right? So it says, why do empires fail? Empires don't collapse overnight, they erode over time. What we often witness as a sudden downfall is actually the final breath of something that has been dying from within for years. It's the breath of something that has been dying from within for years. Let's look at where we currently live. Let's look at some of the things why empires fall, and I want you to make your own assessment on, do you believe that we're living in an empire that's crumbling, right? Why do they fail? And then I'm going to give you how can we evolve through the shift. How do they fail? One is moral decay. When values are traded for vanity, truth for trends, and ethics for exploitation, the souls of a system begin to rot. Plant that in your brain. Overextension of power. Empires fall when they stretch too far, militarily, economically, or socially, without investing in the foundation that got them there. I want you to think about that. Disconnection from the people. When leadership lose sight of those they serve and they govern becomes the height of neglect, revolutions brew beneath the surface. Revolutions brew beneath the surface. Look at what's going on. Look at what's going on. Greed over gratitude. This is what causes empires to fall and fail. Greed over gratitude. A system driven by consumption eventually consumes itself. What's built on exploitation will one day collapse under the weight of its own excess, right? And suppression of truth and thought. When empires censor, silence, and segregate truth, they unknowingly set the stage for their own demise. You cannot mute the masses forever. So I gave you 5 things that causes empires to fall, and if you look at the falling of all of these empires, that's what caused them to fall and fail. I'm going to give them 5 to you one more time. Moral decay, overextension of power, disconnection from the people, greed over gratitude, and suppression of truth and power. But then, like I always say, I'm not going to give you something without providing you information that would also help you to navigate through the storm, right? But here's the shift. How do people rise from this? They rediscover identity. When systems fail, people start asking the right questions. Who am I without a job, the title, the routine? That question births new purpose. This is what people start to do. They ask these questions. They reclaim community. In the ashes of divine empires, communities become sacred again. People link arms, share knowledge, and build together. Are we seeing more of that being created? I don't know. These questions are for you to ask. They awaken spiritually. Collapse forces contemplate. People turn inward and forward. They start healing, meditating, praying, questioning, and connecting with deeper truth. This is how you get, when the collapse starts to happen, this is how you reclaim that. They build alternatives. They build food systems. They educate differently. They change from the currency to consciousness. The people create what the empire could never sustain, power rooted in unity. And this is what the collapse of the empire will try to do. It will try to separate power in the unity of the people. And the last thing is they lead with wisdom. The ones who rise are not just ambitious, they are aligned. They don't chase power, they radiate influence. They become architects of a new way. So I've heard so many people talk about, well, we're in some times right now where, we don't know where we're going. We know where we're going. You have to follow the purpose. Don't panic. Don't panic. Everything that rises must fall. It just depends on how it descends. Does it descend rapidly or does it descend like a feather? Right? And why do empires fall? They fall when the lies can no longer sustain itself. People rise when the truth becomes louder than their fears. This isn't just a historical cycle, it's a spiritual awakening. And you people, you all were built for this moment. So I want to just know, are we living in an empire that we see the effects of what's happening because we've been on the top so long? Is it our turn to now become the empires that I spoke about earlier? The British Empire, the Mongol Empire, the Persian empires, who all believed that they would rule and stay on top forever? That the Creator knows more than any of us know when our time is supposed to be up and when our rule will no longer be accepted based on the way we are ruling. Now, what does this have to do with anything that the Rory T group or our mental wellness initiatives actually works within? This is when people begin to doubt themselves. This is when people begin to panic. We have to understand that our balance and our information is what decides how we move each day. And we have to realize that when we understand what's really going on, we become more comfortable and peaceful in the places that we're in. Now, will things happen overnight? No. But we know that when decay begins to attach itself, it grows at the rate of how we nurture it. So we have to understand that we are in a time right now that we have never been in before. And will it affect us in the future? Only if we allow it to affect us. Only if we don't align with the 5 principles that I talked about that will give us the opportunity to collectively be a better group of human beings. And what are those 5? Again, I'll give them to you. People rediscover unity. They reclaim community. They awaken spiritually. They build alternatives. And they lead with wisdom. So if those are the 5 things that you are transforming yourself into doing, then you too will be an exception to the collapse of the empire. Well, a little different today, but as always, I try to bring information to you from a historical perspective and from a psychological perspective where we need to begin to search inside ourselves and find out our true purpose on this planet. And so with that being said, I hope you have a great weekend plan coming ahead, and I hope you do something that creates memories, because once everything else is gone, the only thing that's going to sustain you are the memories. So until we talk again, I want you to be well. I want you to stay prayed up, and I want you to remember that there's a higher power working in this whole process right now. There's no need for you to try to do anything extra, but follow your purpose and plan. So until we talk, Ashe.